The 17th and early 18th century saw the meteoric rise of the Kingdom of Sweden, from a small backwards nation to a great Baltic powerhouse. One young king, crowned at the age of 15, would lead this Swedish empire both to the heights of its glory and the depths of its defeat. Join with us as we explore the battles of the Great Northern War.
After the destruction of the Saxon army at Pultusk on April 21, 1703, King Charles XII leads his Swedish troops along the Vistula River towards the fortress of Torun. Augustus II flees to Saxony, leaving the fortress under the command of General Christoph Heinrich von Kaunitz. The fortress of Torun, originally built by the Teutonic Order in the mid-13th century, was destroyed in the 15th century by a peasant revolt, only to be rebuilt as a modern star fortress in the 1640s. The fortifications may have protected the city from external threats, but they also limited Torun's expansion, leading to a slow decline in the city's economic prospects. By the outbreak of the Great Northern War, Torun's walls are crumbling and suburbs have sprung up outside its fortifications. Under the command of General Kaunitz, the Saxon garrison scrambles to repair the walls, at times using as much as a third of the entire garrison force for labour. By the time the Swedish vanguard is sighted on the outskirts of the city, the Saxon soldiers have managed to restore Torun's fortifications to a semblance of their former glory. The Saxon troops set alight the suburbs to deny the Swedish infantry a covered approach and withdraw into the city. By May 26, 1703, the Swedish army, 26,000 strong, has encircled the city and dug in, preparing for a siege. When Charles took his Swedish army south to campaign against Augustus the Strong, Peter I of Russia rushed to reform his army, which had been shattered at the Battle of Narva. Peter's ambition for a viable winter port along the Baltic still burns as bright as ever, and so while the Swedish army crushes the Saxon and Polish forces at Kliso, Peter sends his newly reformed army to seize the region of Ingria from the Swedish garrison forces. In the fall of 1702, the Russian army, roughly 30,000 men strong, besieges the small island fortress of Notborg, held by only 440 Swedes. As initial Russian assaults are repulsed, their commander Mikhail Golitsyn orders the transport boats to withdraw, forcing the Russian troops to capture the fortress or die trying. After 13 hours of continuous Russian assaults, the Swedish garrison, now low on ammunition and with only 83 men in fighting condition, offers terms of capitulation. Peter I, who witnessed the bloody assaults, agrees to the terms, and the 83 soldiers, along with 156 sick and wounded Swedes, withdraw safely to Finland. The Russians paid a heavy price for the fortress, losing almost 600 men killed and another 1,000 wounded in the 13-hour assault on Notborg. The Russian army then marches along the banks of the Neva River, capturing Nyenskans on May 12, 1703 after a brief siege and a massive artillery bombardment. After expelling what remains of the Swedish forces in Ingria, Peter finally accomplishes his dream, establishing Petersburg on May 27th, declaring it the new capital city of the Tsardom of Russia. This new capital is far from secure, however, as what remains of the Swedish defensive forces in Ingria are concentrating in Viborg, just a short march north of Petersburg. On May 26th, one day before Peter I of Russia establishes Petersburg, the bulk of the Swedish army arrives outside of Torun and entrenches in a ring around the fortress. The Karelian army is ill-suited for siege warfare, as its tactics focus on rapid advances supported by mobile light artillery. This tactic has led to great successes on previous battlefields, but against the modern fortifications of Torun, their artillery had virtually no effect. While his infantry digs in, Charles sends messages to the garrisons of Riga and Karlskrona, requesting that they send the heavier siege guns that were captured during the previous year's campaigns against the Saxons. On June 8th, the Saxon garrison attempts to sally out, but are quickly repulsed with light casualties on both sides. As June gives way to July, the siege settles into inactivity, with no significant advances made by the Swedish, and the Saxon garrison of Torun slowly weakening due to waves of dysentery and other diseases sweeping through the city's inhabitants. With Charles tied down in Poland, Tsar Peter sends his troops on a foray into Finland, driving back the Swedish forces at the Battle of Sisterbach. Finally, on September 20th, a flotilla of 40 ships arrives outside of Torun, bearing the Swedish siege guns. Soon, the Swedish engineers are placing their heavy guns on the heights south and east of the fortress, and they begin construction of a pontoon bridge across the Vistula. 2 days later, the Saxon forces launch a sortie in a desperate attempt to destroy the new artillery being deployed, and though the surprise of their assault pushes back the Swedes initially, their momentum slows, and they are forced to withdraw back to the fortress. In just 2 more days, on September 24th, the Swedish bombardment begins. It goes on through the day and into the night, the artillery sighting their guns by the light of the fires raging in the city. Still, the Saxons resist. The Swedish bombardment continues, though at a decreased pace, and by the end of the month the citizens of Torun have had enough. They are nearly starving, racked by waves of disease and fire, and yet General Kanitz refuses to surrender the city. The bombardment continues. Finally, on October 12th, with his army out of supplies and the citizens of the city threatening to revolt, General Kanitz proposes terms of surrender, which King Charles quickly accepts. Of the 6,000 Saxon soldiers who held the city at the start of the siege, roughly 1,000 are now dead, the vast majority due to dysentery. The remaining 5,000 are sent as prisoners back to Sweden. The Swedish losses are very light, losing only 50 men killed during the 5-month-long siege. The biggest loss for the Swedish is not in manpower but in time. The agonizingly slow siege is a stark contrast to King Charles's lightning campaigns thus far, exposing a dangerous flaw in the Swedish military doctrine. The Swedish forces in Poland-Lithuania cannot afford to become bogged down in a series of long sieges, while the Russian armies ravage Swedish Estonia and Finland. To ward off another prolonged siege, Charles XII orders his troops to dismantle Torun's defences completely, perhaps even allowing rumours of Swedish savagery to spread in the surrounding countryside, with the hope that future garrisons would surrender without a fight. Torun has fallen to the Swedish king. However, danger continues to linger all around, as Augustus II continues to raise Saxon troops for the war effort, and Peter I establishes his control in Ingria. The war for control of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth is only beginning. If you enjoyed this documentary on the siege of Torun, please consider liking the video as it really helps out the channel, and consider subscribing so you won't miss the next episode of the battles of the Great Northern War.